Okay, so we've cut out our objects, we've transformed them, duplicated them, and put them on these backdrops. Last tutorial we've learned how to do some basic image adjustments using your image adjust, these destructive methods or non-destructive methods by adding some of these adjustment layers here. So we can see we came up with some of these hue saturation adjustment layers, photo filters, levels, brightness, contrast, different adjustment layers to give us the look we want for these individual layers. We learned how to affect the whole layer below it or just specific parts or objects of layers. Now we're going to put a textured layer over here and do a blending mode up here in the layers menu. Do a blending mode to give this sort of an older, worn out photographic look. And so first thing I'm going to do is go to the internet, and I'm going to choose Firefox, and we're just going to Google, I'm going to maybe do a vintage photo texture. Basically any word you use, vintage photo texture, cement texture, wood grain texture, with the word texture after it. Google should bring up a bunch of images that are flat textures that are sort of designed for use for photography or for web design. Okay, so I just want to add a little more grungy texture over this image and make it look sort of old and dated. Alright, good rule of thumb whenever you're searching for images to use for Photoshop, use your search tools and search for a large size image. Those are the best. We also want to avoid images that have watermarks or copyright marks on them. And so I'm going to find a nice, I'll find a couple and we'll experiment with them with our blending modes. This one looks pretty good. I could click this image here or view the image. Usually it's a larger image, and I can click and drag this to my desktop or to another folder. Go back, find another texture for overlaying it. This might be cool, sort of a text layer over that. Can view the image. I can also right click, or let me zoom in first, click, right click, save image as, and then browse to your folder. Mine's on my desktop, and I'm going to save it in there. Actually, I'm just going to save it to the desktop. Let me find one more effect, one more layer texture. Okay. This one looks pretty cool. Actually, it's got watermarks on it, so I'm not going to use that. Do one more search. Let's do parchment texture. Still in the large image search, and there's a pretty good one there. Do the image, nice large image. Right click. I'm going to save image as and save it on my desktop. Hit save. There we go. I'm going to minimize that. And then I can import these images a couple ways. I can go through Photoshop and go File, Open, browse on my desktop, find my first image and say Open. It'll open this texture right on top of my other image. I can click that tab, separate it out, make sure I'm on my Move tool in my toolbar, click on this and drag it right on top of here. Okay, Command Z. And I'm going to click this layer over here, this texture layer, and drag it on top of all my other layers. And I can move him around. And I'm going to transform. Command T and transform so I can cover all my image. You can do this blending mode texture over just specific layers, or I'm going to do it over the whole image here. Okay, so that layer is selected, and over here in my layers window, right here where it says normal, I can click these triangles here and choose all these different blending modes. interact differently with the lights and darks. So let's just look at a couple of them. Some may look good, some may not. So if I go to darken, it looks pretty cool. I got a little bit of that texture showing through here. Multiply, that's pretty nice. It makes it look like an old black and white grungy photograph. Color burn, a little too dark for me. Linear burn. Let's look at a couple more that we quite often use. Lighten gives it a nice overlay. A little too strong, but I like some of the effect here, so I can lower the opacity so it just affects it a little bit. Okay. Put it back to full, and let's check out a few more. We have overlay. That's a pretty cool effect. It's sort of like that grainy, gritty effect on there, but maybe too strong, so I could lower the opacity a little. Still has somewhat of that texture, but lower the opacity. Soft light, about the same, not quite as strong as the overlay. Hard light, and pin light's a pretty cool one. And hard mix, really digitized look. And then we can do difference, which reverses the color tones. Exclusive is almost a negative effect. And hue. I'm gonna go for the overlay. I like that effect. I'm going to lower the percentage a little bit so it's not quite as strong. I like how that is affecting my background, but I don't really like how it's affecting her parts of her face. So what I can do over here in my layers menu, on that textured layer, I can add a mask. Down here at this little icon, add layer mask. Now if I click on that layer mask, I can do certain things to that mask. I can erase into it. So if I erase into that mask, it's at 29% up here. I can raise it a little more, 60%. I have to change my foreground to white. I'm erasing so that texture is not present over her face. It's not affecting this part of her face, but it's affecting this other part of her and the background. So her face is still sort of cleared out, but that gritty textures on everything else. Okay, let's add another texture. I could do File, Open again, or I could come down here to my desktop. Minimize this guy. Come down here to my desktop, grab one of my other textures, and drag it right into Photoshop. That's another way to open an image. Okay, I'm going to click that tab, take it off of there. Click on the Move tool. Click this texture and drag it right on top of my other image. Okay, right here it's on the top layer. It's top layer now. Well, I don't want this image. This time I don't want this image to affect these people at all. So I can click that layer and bring it all the way behind my two protesters. Hit Command T and drag it out. And adjust it so it covers everything. Hit Enter. And once again, I can play with some of these. I can do Darken. Oh, I sort of like that effect. So I still get that gritty tone, but it's behind my hue saturation, behind my people here. So it gives it that nice old photograph look to the background. Well, let me see how that looks if I put it over all my layers. So I can click that layer, drag it to the top. Yeah, that's pretty nice too. It's affecting every layer now, and it maintains some of its original color. Let's darken. Let's overlay. A little too strong. Soft light. Vivid light. Way too strong. I sort of like that overlay. And I'll lower the opacity a little bit so there's just a subtle effect there. Nice little textured effect there. Okay, and that's fine. And close that. And let's get our last texture layer this time. Another way, I can quickly click on this and drag it right into my file. Okay, now that positions it on my file, and I hit Enter, and this time it's a smart object. If I look at my layer here on that little thumbnail, there's another thumbnail within that, which means it's a smart object. And I don't want it to be a smart object at this time. Actually, that's the wrong texture. Let me delete that. Let me come back here to my desktop, find this vintage texture here, bring that in there. There it goes. Hit Enter. This one's a smart object since I dragged it right into my file. I don't want it to be a smart object, so I'm going to right click on that layer, rasterize layer. Another way to do that, layer, rasterize, or smart objects rasterize. Either way. Okay, I'm going to adjust this texture layer, Command T, bring it to the top. This one I also want to stretch over my whole image, double click, and I can play with some of these blending modes. I could do overlay. It's pretty cool. Soft light. It's very faded out texture. Vivid light. Linear light. And you can experiment with those on your own. Darken. Ooh, I like that one. I like the darken effect. But once again, it's a little too strong. And I'm going to stretch out a little bit further. So I want to be able to erase into this a little. First I'm going to fade it out a little. And I want to be able to erase into this so I don't want it to affect everything. So I'm going to hit enter, select it to commit to that transformation. Come down here, add a layer mask. And come over to my eraser tool and make my brush a lot larger. Lower the percentage a little bit. My layer mask, and I can erase into some of this texture where I don't want it to be real visible on my person or the foreground of the background. There we go. I just want this little bit of faded text effect in the background. That's pretty cool. Maybe around 80%. I think that looks good. There we go. It's pretty cool. I like it. I can save this. File, save. So that's how we add textured layers and adjust it using the blending modes, opacity, and a layer mask.